مرحبا حبيبيس.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Habibis, to catch the full episode and conversation with Ben Shapiro, become a Habibi patron today by signing up at patreon.com/Habibi Bros in the description of this
video.
There are some hoarders in this house. There are some hoarders in this house. There are some hoarders in this house. Hold on. I say certified free, 7 days a week. Wet ass pussy, make that pull-out game weak.
Yeah, you effin' with some wet-ass P-word. P-word is female genitalia. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass P-word. Give me everything you got for this wet-ass P-word. Beat it up, N-word.
Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What's going on, the BBs? I'm Siraj Hashmi.
I'm Mujahed Kobbe.
And we're the Habibi Bros. Welcome to another episode of the Habibi Power Hour. Jay, we got a really great conversation today with Ben Shapiro. And we just wrapped it up. And
right.
I have to say, might be the best thing and best interview we've ever done.
Right. I don't think there's been an Islamist happier to capture Jew other than Hamas compared to the example we saw on your face.
So let's just go ahead and get into it.
Let's do it.
Joining us now is the legendary host, the political commentator, Ben Shapiro. He is the author of The Authoritarian Moment, How the Left Weaponized America's Institutions Against Dissent. And he's also the host of the Ben Shapiro Show on the Daily Wire, also the founder of the Daily Wire. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, Habibis.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom. And an early Shana Tova to you, Ben. I know that you're probably going to be taking like a month off to celebrate the new year. Probably well-deserved.
Yeah, it's like 2 days next week, and then Yom Kippur is the following week, and then the week after that, 2 days, and the following week, 2 days. This is why I can't take off a day the rest of the year, basically.
I know, right?
It's so bad. When it falls on the weekend, that's much better. When it falls in the middle of the week, it's a disaster area.
Well, this is the first time we actually have the heads of all three major religions joining us. Me, the Siraj, the head of the Islamic faith. Ben, obviously the head of the Jewish faith. And then Jay, who is the head of the Church of Ass Eating. So thank you so much for coming together. You know, we really have been looking forward to this actual Abrahamic Accords. And but first, I mean, let's talk about your book, because The Authoritarian Moment, it's a very good read. Especially, it's great for those who are especially not in the know on what's going on. And before we kind of get into some of the more details about it, what inspired you to write this book?
So I think that, late last year, I was just noticing that there was this pervasive sense, particularly among people on the right, that they could not speak freely. And you started to see this creeping over toward the middle and then to the center left. You started to see people ranging from Barry Weiss to Andrew Sullivan, a bunch of people just starting to point out that they were feeling very uncomfortable saying what they thought. It's in the spate of people leaving major publications over having spoken out or being afraid to speak out. And this came directly in the aftermath of the pandemic and in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter protests, many of which turned into riots. And it seemed to me that the time was ripe to talk about the fact that so many people in the country just feel deeply uncomfortable. And if you look at the polling data, it's pretty much everybody except for people who consider themselves very ardently to the left tend to feel that they can't speak publicly, freely, and get away with it. And that's a really dangerous place to be. And so, that's sort of what prompted me to start thinking about this. Like, why is it that it feels like all the institutions suddenly are pushing the same message at the same time? And I don't want to be conspiratorial about it, because I don't believe in conspiracy theories as a general rule. But at the same time, there was no question that there was sort of this tsunami of like-minded thinking coming from nearly every major institution over the course of the last year and a half minimum. And it was worth, I thought, investigating.
Jay?
No, it really was, and I think my mom is definitely getting a copy of this book because the way you lay it out very clearly for people on the left to actually see the point of view that you're making is very very informative, and I think it works really well, especially with, like Suraj said, people who are not in the know or who are extremely online, like some people are on Twitter.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
in the online world, a lot of the stories that you're going to see in the book, you've probably seen before. But I hope to sort of explore the fundamentals underlying why those stories are happening. So instead of just saying, yeah, here's a bad thing happening at the university level, the book is really more about like, how did the universities get that way? Or instead of just looking at, a blow up that happens over MLB in Georgia, why is it that corporations are created in such a way? Why are they structured in such a way that they're susceptible to pressure to do this sort of stuff? And so I tried to sort of get a little bit under the hood as to how these institutions historically got the way that they are right now, and also why the incentive structure continues to push them to be this way.
Yeah, there's for your book came out in late July, and it's also available on audiobook. I actually happened to both read and listen to the audiobook because, let's be honest, man, I cannot really read the book in any other voice besides your own. And so I was like, I gotta at least listen to the audiobook as I'm reading this. And then I hear Ben break into both Trump and Biden impressions in the middle of the reading of the audiobook. I'm like, this guy's really good with his impressions. Like, where does this even come from?
Yeah, I've been there's somewhere you just listen to people, talk for long enough, and if you do this professionally, you find yourself speaking in their voice bizarrely.
Yeah.
I will tell you that my daughter, who's 7, does a pretty good Trump. Yeah, her favorite is like a dog. She'll just walk around, and every time she's a dog, she'll be like, "That it's a dog. Looks like a dog." And
So Ben, Ben,
so, there are certain ones that are pretty good. There are certain ones that suck. My Bernie was pretty good for a while. I had a pretty good Jerry Brown. I miss doing my Chris Matthews. I used to do a fabulous Chris Matthews because it was
Let's
all
hear it.
stream of consciousness insanity. And now I can't do that anymore because it's not relevant. So every so often I'll break that out, but it's pretty rare. My Obama actually, I feel like my Obama's underrated because I break out in Obama.
The Obama actually is really good. It's a good cadence. But my question for you is, who does the best Ben Shapiro impression?
Oh man, so I haven't seen too many of them. I've seen there's a Freedom Tunes guy who does a pretty good impression of my cadence. There was somebody who did. I can't remember who did that. There was this video of me interviewing Biden, and he did a pretty good me, I thought. But it's hard because when you hear your own voice in your head all the time because you're the one talking, your voice doesn't even sound like your voice, right? When you hear a recording played back to you, it's different being played back to you than it is how it sounds in your head. Like believe it or not, my voice sounds deep, masculine, and mellifluous in my own ears. It's just that when it comes back at me from a computer, I'm like, whoa, what the hell's that?
Yeah, it's perfect for the audiobook because if anybody else was reading your book to an audio listener, it would be a great disservice to your product. So, but kind of getting back to the book, obviously, since the book has been published, it was published in late July. Just in the last month, I mean, has there been anything in your view that has been the most alarming that sort of falls in line with sort of this push towards authoritarianism that you're seeing from the left?
I mean, on a governmental level, obviously, I think the continued focus on lockdowns and mandates and all of that, I find that super alarming because, again, I just don't know what the end point is for any of the public health policy that's being made. And there is a chapter in the book on public health and how the public health establishment has sort of gotten used to speaking outside of its purview and how a lot of what they're talking is politics now. And when it comes to COVID, I really feel like that's pretty solidly the case at this point. I've been very pro-vax all the way along. And it is odd how every so often I'll have to seek a correction from mainstream media that'll say that, oh, it's just another anti-vaxxer. I'm like, guys, I was pro-vax before it was cool to be pro-vax, right? I was pro-vax going back to like 2013, 2014. You can see me talking about MMR. Like, I'm very pro-vaccine. My wife's a doctor. She used to do presentations on the power of vaccines. So I had to have the Atlantic correct something along these lines. The Week had to correct something along these lines. There's like a bit of a variety of places that have had to correct. But with that said, I'm pro-vax. And at the same time, I don't understand what the public health bureaucracy is doing right now. And yet the media continues to cram down this line that if you disagree with the public health establishment in any way, this means that you're very bad and you're vicious and you're terrible. And it's really off-putting and gross because, again, if you look at the history of this pandemic, what you see is at the very beginning, we didn't know anything about the virus. And so we were locking down. And I was like, okay, now you can listen to my show. I'm like, I get it. You know, we don't know anything at this point. And then it became pretty clear that this thing was really age stratified. And that a lot of the lockdown procedures, like, you know, washing all your fruits and vegetables and making sure that you shut down all the playgrounds, like a lot, it wasn't transmitting outside. We knew a couple months in kind of what were the most risky activities, what were not the most risky activities. Even then, I wasn't anti-mask. I was like, okay, the mask is a tool to prevent transmission of the virus when you're in crowded areas, no problem. And the idea was this is going to be the standard until we get a vaccine. And I thought, okay, that makes some sense, right? Because if the idea is with regard to the masking that we're going to do this forever, I'm not in favor of it. Then what we really should be doing is starting to tranche out the population almost the way Sweden did, where you protect the most vulnerable and all the 20-year-old healthy kids can go to college, infect each other. Now they're all immune and you've actually taken that vector away. But if you're waiting for the vaccine, okay, fine. We'll all mask up until we get the vaccine. Then we get the vaccine. Then it was wait until everybody's had the chance to get the vaccine. Now, every person in America above the age of 12 has had a chance to get the vaccine. And we're still doing this. We're still acting as though mandates and masking my kids in school, like this is a great idea with very little or no data to back it. In the case of masking kids in school, a lot of reverse data to back it in terms of damage that's done to the kids. But again, it's this crammed down feeling like if you disagree with this stuff, you must be some sort of kook and some sort of idiot and you want to kill people. Like that continues apace, obviously, over the course of the last month. In terms of kind of specific stories, the one that got me was this week, Amazon Web Services announced that they're going to start doing more of the kind of stuff they did with Parler, where they're going to start policing content more to see if they're going to kick people off their service. I know that there was a story that I wanted to look more into about one of the credit card companies kicking like Michael Flynn off their credit card. And I thought to myself, that's kind of a dangerous precedent. This kind of stuff where neutral service providers are starting to arm up to say that certain people don't get to use their product or that certain people are incapable of being part of the, you know, just not even political conversation, part of just like common everyday experiences. That sort of stuff is scary to me.
Yeah, actually, you know, it's interesting because one of your colleagues, Candace Owens, I mean, she just recently published, I think on her Instagram, that she was denied being tested by a COVID testing center, a private one, because of her stance on COVID over the course of the pandemic. I mean, look, I think conservatives and people on the right have been far more diverse in their thinking on, you know, the vaccines or on any of these treatments. I mean, you obviously have been very pro-vax. I'm sure there are people that you've come across who are very, very anti-vax.
Yeah, pretty much everyone works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just, I mean, Jay and I mean, we're both very pro-vax as well. It's just, it's interesting. You know, we joined Rumble just 2 weeks ago, and the main story about that was that the main criticism of, say, me joining with Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi Gabbard and Bridget Fedesi and Zay Jelani, a number of other people, is that we're joining a website that has been promoting anti-vax conspiracy theories, what have you, as if that information is not allowed to be flowing. But that's a separate issue. My question for you, though, is like, how is it that, what's your takeaway on this whole Candace Owens bit? Because, you know, you just mentioned Amazon Web Services trying to deny neutral service. Yeah. Is this, I mean, what's your take on that?
So listen, I am, when it comes to what businesses do, I'm nearly completely libertarian. So I actually am against most forms of anti-discrimination law because I think that the best solution to a business that's discriminating, let's say a business discriminates against Jews, right? My people. Right. I think the solution to that is not to shut down the business or prosecute them. I think that the solution to that is to open up your own country club, which is what Jews have historically done in a wide variety of cities. But putting that aside, you know, whether the company has the right to do that, I think that on an ideological level, if they want to be jackasses, they certainly have the right to do that. But it's certainly troubling. There's a difference between you have the right to do something and you're misusing the right. They do have the right to do that. Are they misusing the right? Yeah, they're misusing it dramatically, and they're making the world a worse place for it. This is the same sort of mentality that you see Don Lemon was saying the other day. He's like, maybe, you know, you shouldn't get hospital service. You shouldn't go to the hospital if you're unvaccinated. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of strange because we routinely take care of people at hospitals who do things that are poor decisions for their own health. Like that's probably the vast majority of medical conditions in the United States. is, people who did something, they were told by their doctor not to do it, and then they went ahead and they did it anyway. Do they not get hospital care now? This is turning very scary very quickly. And what it's going to turn into eventually is two parallel tracks, right? You'll have a COVID service center that services everybody, and a COVID service center that only services people who are very pro-vax. First of all, the COVID center that is like for people who are very pro-vax, I'm not sure even why you're being tested if you're vaccinated as a general rule. Just on a scientific level, once you're vaccinated, you're good, right? I mean, if you're worried about passing it on to somebody else, I'm wondering why you're so worried about that, considering that everybody has the capacity to get a vaccine or is a child and is not in particularly vulnerable state. So, but as sort of a general story, it is insane that these people decided that because Candace has a position on vaccines, a position I don't hold, or on this vaccine, a position that I don't hold, that she doesn't get to have a COVID test. And how's that supposed to forward the bottom line, which is preventing transmission of COVID, right? Like that's the part that's really insane, is that they're saying we would rather that Candace Owens not get tested and then maybe walk into a crowded place having COVID than test her and let her know whether she has COVID because we don't like her. That's crazy.
So Habibis, if you like that conversation, go ahead and become a Habibi patron today by signing up to our Patreon at patreon.com/Habibi Bros in the description.
Down below.